They introduced me as the one who cleans houses, then my $18 million company walked into the room. My name is Maya Whitfield. I'm 33 years old. Last Saturday, at my sister's engagement dinner, my mother stood up in front of 22 guests, smiled the way she smiles at strangers in church, and said, "This is our other daughter. She cleans houses for a living." My father didn't correct her. He just nodded and said, "We stopped expecting much from her years ago." Then a woman across the table, someone I'd met exactly once before, 18 months earlier, in a boardroom 300 miles away, set down her fork, looked at me, and said 4 words that ended the evening as everyone in that room understood it. "Wait. You're her?" My mother's face went the color of the tablecloth. What happened in the next 30 minutes is the reason I'm telling you this story. But the dinner wasn't the explosion. It was just the spark that hit a fuse my family had been laying for 11 years. So let me take you back to where it actually started, because you need to understand exactly how much had to break before that table went silent. If a moment like this has ever happened to you, if you've ever sat in a room and watched someone shrink the truth about who you are right in front of you, stay with me. Tap that subscribe button if this story is the kind you want more of, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. I grew up in a town called Brindle Falls, Ohio. Population 8,000 and dropping. The kind of place where the diner knows your order before you sit down and everyone's business is everyone else's business by Sunday morning. My father, Russell, spent 31 years as an assistant manager at the same regional bank branch. Never promoted past assistant. Never demoted either. He used to say steady was its own kind of success. My mother, Carol, had been a legal secretary before she married him, sharp, organized, the kind of woman who could spot a typo across a room. She quit the week she found out she was pregnant with my older sister, Brooke. She never went back to work. I don't think she ever fully forgave that decision, and I don't think she ever blamed herself for it either. Brooke is 2 years older than me. 35 now. She works in commercial real estate in Columbus, and every promotion she's ever received has been announced to me by my mother before Brooke even called to tell me herself. Our hallway at home tells the story without anyone needing to say a word. Brooke's college diploma. Brooke's Realtor of the Year plaque. Brooke's sorority composite photo, gold frame. My side of the wall stops at a single photo from my high school graduation. Nothing after that. 4 years of business school came and went, and somehow none of it earned a frame. There's a script my mother runs at church potlucks and grocery store run-ins and family reunions. Brooke just got promoted again, she'll say, and then she'll pause, just long enough for the moment to land, and pivot. And Maya's, still figuring things out. My father never adds detail. He never corrects her. He just stands there, hands in his pockets, looking at his shoes like a man waiting for a number to be called. Silence, I learned early, is just another way of agreeing. The summer I turned 22, I had a business degree and a plan. My mother had a different plan for me. She'd already put a deposit down on a graduate program 2 hours away, printed the course catalog, left it on my dresser like a hint I was supposed to take. I sat her down at the kitchen table and told her I wasn't going. I told her I wanted to start a commercial cleaning company. I had a binder. Market research. Startup costs. A 12-month cash flow projection I'd built myself. She didn't open the binder. She looked at it the way you look at something you've already decided isn't worth your time. You want to clean toilets, she said. That's the plan you drove home to tell me. My father walked in from the garage right as she said it. He didn't ask what we were discussing. He just said, "I already told the guys at the branch you got into grad school." Like the conversation was already over before I'd had a chance to finish it. Only one person in my family asked to see the binder. My grandmother, Eleanor. 76 at the time, sharp enough to balance her own checkbook to the penny and call you out if you tried to round in your favor. She sat on her porch swing, read every page front to back, and asked me one question: "Where do you see yourself in 3 years?" When I told her, she didn't blink. She went inside, came back with $400 in cash from an envelope she kept behind her recipe box, and pressed it into my hand along with something else, a small embroidered handkerchief that had belonged to her own mother. Cream-colored cotton, the initials EM stitched in pale blue thread in the corner. For the hard days, she said. Every plan worth having has some. That night, my mother told me that if I wanted to spend my life scrubbing floors, I could do it without a cent of her help. I didn't argue. I packed what fit in my car and drove 4 hours to Columbus before sunrise. My first apartment cost $490 a month. A studio with one window and a radiator that banged like something trapped behind the wall every night around 3. I bought a used cargo van for $1,900, no logo, air conditioning that worked on its own schedule. My first client was a small dental practice, 3 exam rooms, a waiting area, a bathroom with cracked tile. $200 a week. I cleaned it myself at 5 in the morning, then spent afternoons knocking on office doors and evenings doing my own bookkeeping at the kitchen counter with a calculator and a legal pad. 6 months in, I had 4 contracts and a body that ached in places I didn't know could ache. By the end of year 1, I'd brought in $58,000 in revenue. Profit after expenses, $9,000. I hired my first employee that winter, a woman named Rosa, a single mother who showed up 15 minutes early to every single shift and never once complained about the work. She's still with me today, 15 years later, running an entire regional division. Every Sunday, without missing a single week, I called my grandmother. She asked real questions. How many clients this month? What was my close rate on new bids? Had I looked into liability insurance yet? She listened the way people listen when they actually believe the thing you're building is real and not a phase you'll grow out of. Every other week, I called home. The conversation followed the same script every time. You ready to come back yet? My mother would ask. Not yet, Mom. Well, Brooke just got a new title at her firm. You should call and congratulate her. My father never picked up the extension. Not once in those years. By year 3, something happened that I almost picked up the phone to tell my mother about myself, before I caught myself and remembered that almost doesn't survive long in a family like mine. That was the year I signed a contract for a 12-story office tower on the north side of the city. Annual value, $290,000. I opened a second location. Hired employee number 31. Revenue crossed $1.1 million. I was 25 years old, running a company that cleaned more square footage in a single week than most people walk in a year. I called my mother anyway. I don't know why I kept trying. Maybe some part of me still believed the math would eventually mean something to her. Mom, I just signed a contract worth $290,000 a year. Silence. Then, so how many people do you have mopping floors now? 31. 31 people mopping floors. Well, that's something, I guess. My father's voice came through the speaker in the background. Your sister just got accepted into a leadership fellowship at her firm. I sat in my office, an actual office by then, with a desk and a filing cabinet and a small framed photo of my grandmother on the shelf and looked at the business card I just had printed. Navy blue. Clean typeface. A tagline along the bottom, built to be trusted. I'd spent 2 full days choosing that exact shade of blue. That was the last time I volunteered a single detail about my business to my parents. There was no dramatic announcement, no line drawn in the sand. I just ran out of doors worth knocking on. When you tell someone you signed a contract worth nearly $300,000 and their first question is how many people you have mopping floors, the message is clear enough. They've already decided what you are. New information doesn't reopen a closed file. For the next 8 years, my parents believed exactly what they wanted to believe about my life. And I let them. It was easier than fighting a story that had already been written before I had a chance to read the first page. Fast forward to today. My company, Whitfield Facility Solutions, operates in 16 states with 310 employees. Annual revenue, $18.2 million. We service hospitals, university campuses, corporate headquarters, even 2 state government buildings. Our employee retention rate sits at 89%, the highest in our entire industry segment. I built a training pipeline for new hires, many of them immigrants and English language learners, that 3 of our competitors have since tried to copy. I live in a 2-bedroom condo in Columbus that I bought outright, in cash, 4 years ago. I drive a 2020 Honda Accord with cloth seats and won too many parking tickets in the glove box. I still keep a small bottle of homemade citrus vinegar cleaner on my desk, the same recipe I mixed in that studio apartment when I couldn't afford the commercial stuff. The smell still takes me back to 5 a.m. shifts and aching shoulders, and somehow I never wanted to stop smelling it. None of this is hidden. I have a company website, a LinkedIn profile with my name on it, even a short feature in a regional business journal from 2 years back. My parents have never looked at any of it. Not once. As far as they're concerned, the story ended the day I drove away with a binder and a van. Then my sister called. It was the first time we'd spoken in nearly 4 months. I was in the middle of reviewing a facility bid when her name lit up my phone. I almost let it ring out. "I'm engaged," she said, before I'd even finished saying hello. Caleb Ashford. His family's hosting an engagement dinner next Saturday. Mom wants you there. Mom wants me there, or you want me there? Does it matter? Grandma's coming. She asked for you specifically. That settled it. When my grandmother asks, I show up. There is no version of my life where that's not true. After we hung up, I did what I always do before walking into anything unfamiliar. I researched it properly. I typed the name into my laptop. Ashford Realty Group. Over 200 commercial properties across 2 states. I knew that name. I knew it extremely well. 18 months earlier, my company had won the cleaning contract for 44 of their buildings. $4.1 million a year. The single largest deal in my company's history. The agreement had been signed by the chair of their board, a woman named Diane Ashford, the groom's mother. I sat and stared at my screen for a long time. The Friday before the dinner, I stood in my office and looked at the little bottle on my desk. Citrus, vinegar, water. The same recipe from the beginning of everything. I picked my outfit for the next night carefully, not to impress anyone, not to prove a single thing, but the way I dress every day of my life. A navy blouse, the same shade as my company logo, though nobody at that table would know that. Black slacks. Flat shoes. No jewelry except a thin gold chain my grandmother gave me on my 30th birthday. Saturday morning, I called her before I left. "Drive safe, honey," she said. Her voice had gotten thinner over the past year. The heart medication made her tired more than she let on. "And Maya. Don't let your mother make you small tonight." I drove 3 hours east. Flat highway, dead cornfields, radio stations fading in and out like old friendships you'd forgotten you still missed. 3 hours to decide exactly how much of myself I was willing to bring into that room. I thought about Diane Ashford the entire drive. She would be there. She would very likely recognize me. I had no idea what she might say, or what my parents would do when she said it. I want to be completely clear about one thing: I wasn't planning anything. I drove to that dinner for one single reason: a 76-year-old woman with a tired heart who wanted to see her granddaughter. Everything else simply happened on its own. The venue was a restaurant on the edge of town called the Birch House, exposed brick, white linen, the kind of place that charges $40 for a pork chop and calls it elevated comfort food. I pulled into the lot 5 minutes early. My mother's car was already there. My sister's white SUV sat 2 spots down, a just-engaged sticker on the back bumper, perfectly centered, like it had been applied with a level. The private dining room sat in the back. Long table, 22 place settings, warm lighting, bread baskets already out. My mother met me at the door. New necklace, plum-colored dress, a hug that lasted exactly as long as it needed to for show and not a second longer. "You look comfortable," she said, eyes scanning my blouse and flats. The smile didn't reach anywhere near her eyes. My father shook my hand. His own daughter. "Glad you made it," he said, looking somewhere over my shoulder the entire time. My sister crossed the room and hugged me with both arms, which actually surprised me. She introduced me to Caleb, a tall, polite, firm handshake, and said, this is my older sister. She's based in Columbus. A pause. No job talk tonight, okay? Tonight's about us. At the far end of the table, I spotted my grandmother in her wheelchair, thinner than she'd been 3 months earlier, cardigan buttoned all the way to her throat. She reached for my hand before I even reached for hers. "There's my girl," she said. I sat beside her. Diane Ashford hadn't arrived yet. If you've ever sat at a family table and felt like the person being described wasn't actually you, stick around, because what happens in the next 20 minutes is exactly why I'm telling this story. Like this video if it's hitting close to home, and subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. Appetizers came out. My mother worked the table like a campaign manager working a room of donors, making introductions one by one, and every single person got a title attached to their name. "This is my brother Dale, 30 years with the county fire department. My niece just finished her nursing degree, top of her class." Every person tagged with a rank, a reason to be respected. She skipped me. Not dramatically. Not with any visible pause. She just moved past my chair the way you walk past a lamp you've owned so long you no longer notice it's there. Caleb's father, a silver-haired man named Walter, noticed. He leaned across the table toward me, genuinely curious. "And what do you do, Maya?" Before I could answer, my mother's voice cut in from 2 seats away. "Oh, Maya does cleaning work. Residential, mostly." A small wave of her hand, like brushing crumbs off a counter. Walter nodded politely. Caleb's sister, a teacher in her mid-20s, tilted her head. "Oh, like a cleaning service? That's actually pretty cool." My mother smiled. "Well, it's a living." Under the table, my grandmother found my hand and squeezed it once. Firm. Her knuckles were swollen, but the grip hadn't lost a thing. Then the front door opened. Heels on hardwood. A woman's voice apologizing for traffic on the highway. Diane Ashford walked into the private dining room, and everything I thought I knew about how this evening was going to go shifted in a single second. Let me take you back 18 months, because you need to understand exactly who just walked into that room. I had flown out for the single biggest pitch of my career. Ashford Realty Group managed over 200 commercial properties, office towers, medical complexes, mixed-use developments. They needed one vendor to handle cleaning for 44 of those buildings. The contract was worth $4.1 million a year. I wore my best navy suit. I brought a 38-page proposal I'd spent 3 weeks building, staffing models, quality control protocols, cost breakdowns. Diane Ashford chaired that meeting. She asked more questions than the other 5 people at the table combined. She wanted to know my retention rate. She wanted to know about my training pipeline. She wanted to know why I started the company in the first place. I told her the truth. I told her I cleaned my first office at 22 with a spray bottle and a borrowed mop bucket, and that I decided no one doing that work should ever feel invisible while doing it. She didn't smile. She wrote something down. After I signed the contract, she walked me to the elevator and said, "I've signed a great many contracts in my career, Maya. This is the first time I've felt like the person across the table cared more about the people doing the work than the margin on the page." I'd kept that sentence in my head for over a year. It was the first time anyone with real authority had looked at what I'd built and called it exactly what it was. My parents had 11 years to say something like that. A stranger said it to me in 15 minutes. Back at the dinner, Diane made her way around the table, handshake, eye contact, a name for everyone. She reached me. She stopped. Half a second, maybe less, but I caught it. A flicker of recognition behind her eyes, followed almost instantly by recalculation. Her gaze moved to my blouse, the exact shade she'd seen across a boardroom table a year and a half earlier. She took my hand and held it a beat longer than she'd held anyone else's. "Maya. How lovely to see you here." Her voice was warm, measured, but there was a question folded inside it she clearly wasn't ready to unfold just yet. "Mrs. Ashford. Good to see you too." She sat down across from me, placed her napkin in her lap, and looked at me one more time. Nobody else noticed. My mother was telling Walter about the time Brooke won a regional award. My father was studying the wine list like it held a hidden message. But I noticed. And Diane knew that I noticed. She didn't say anything else for the next 20 minutes. She complimented the appetizers. She asked Caleb about his new apartment. And she waited. Main course arrived: seared salmon, roasted vegetables, a side dish nobody touched because the conversation had shifted to careers. It was Walter who opened the door, completely innocently. "Carol, you must be proud of both your girls." My mother set down her fork and tilted her head in that exact half-smile, half-calculation expression I'd seen 1,000 times before. She was framing the next shot. "Oh, Brooke is our shining star," she said. "Promoted twice in 3 years. Her firm just handed her their biggest client in the region." She touched my sister's arm. Brooke smiled, a little embarrassed, but not enough to stop it. My mother let the silence sit just long enough to do its work before the pivot landed. "Maya's taken a different path. Very hands-on." My father didn't need a cue. He leaned toward Walter like they were sharing a joke over drinks. "She started out cleaning offices right after college. We figured it was temporary." A small laugh. 11 years later. He let the sentence trail off, shrugged, like the rest of it wasn't even worth finishing. Caleb's sister looked at me. Caleb looked at his plate. Walter stopped chewing entirely. I cut my salmon. Steady hand. Chewed. Swallowed. Took a sip of water. At the end of the table, my grandmother set her fork down hard enough that it clinked against the plate. "Maya is doing just fine, Carol." My mother didn't miss a beat, smile still perfectly in place. "Of course she is, Mom." Nobody said otherwise. Nobody said otherwise. That was always how she operated. Never an accusation you could pin to anything specific. Just implication, layered thick enough that you couldn't quite breathe under it. Diane Ashford picked up her water glass. Set it down without drinking. Her eyes hadn't left my mother in over 30 seconds. My mother never noticed. She never looked at the people who were actually watching her. Between the main course and dessert, I stepped away to the restroom. My father was waiting in the hallway when I came back out, hands in his pockets, shoulders rounded like a man who'd been standing there debating whether to stay or leave. "Hey, kiddo. You doing okay?" "I'm fine, Dad." He shifted his weight, left foot, right foot. "I know your mother can be a lot sometimes. But she means well." "Does she?" He opened his mouth. Something flickered across his face, not quite courage, but the shadow it might cast. His fingers turned his wedding ring once. Twice. Then, from the dining room, "Russell, can you come help with the wine?" My mother's voice. Crisp. Final. The way you call a dog that's wandered too far from the yard. He blinked. I should go. He turned and walked back without looking over his shoulder. I stood in that hallway for a moment and understood that this half-sentence, this almost, was the most my father was ever going to offer me. I'd stopped counting on almost a long time before that night. I walked back to the table and sat down. My grandmother touched my wrist under the table without looking at me. I nodded once. She let go. My sister had stepped away to talk with Caleb near the window. Her phone sat face down on the table beside her bread plate, and when it buzzed, the screen lit up just enough for me to read the notification banner without trying. A group chat. Wedding planning. I didn't pick it up. I didn't touch it. But the preview sat right there against the white tablecloth, and I have functioning eyes. My mother's message, sent 2 hours before dinner: "Whatever happens, don't let Maya talk about her job tonight. The Ashfords don't need to know our family has a cleaning lady in it." My sister's reply, sent 1 hour before dinner: "Already handled. Told her no job talk. Just introduced her as my sister from Columbus." That's it. I read both lines twice. Then the screen went dark. 22 people in that room. 3 of them had coordinated, in writing, with timestamps, to make sure I stayed small for the night. Not a careless slip. A plan. I didn't decide to expose anyone that night. There was no rehearsed speech sitting in my back pocket. I just made a decision that was about a decade overdue. I would stop being smaller than I am. If anyone asked me a direct question for the rest of the evening, I would give a direct answer. No downplaying. No performing modesty to protect people who had never once protected me. Diane caught my eye across the table while stirring cream into her coffee with the slow precision of someone who notices everything in a room. "How's business treating you?" she asked. "Busy," I said. "Good busy." She nodded, took a sip, said nothing else. But I could see her doing the math, the woman my mother had described against the woman she'd sat across from in a boardroom. The numbers weren't adding up, and Diane Ashford has never been a woman who tolerates bad arithmetic. If you've ever felt invisible at your own family's table, I need you to hit subscribe right now, because what happens next is the entire reason I sat down to record this. Dessert plates hadn't even landed yet when my mother stood up and tapped her knife against her wine glass. 2 crisp clinks. The room went quiet. "I'd like to say a few words," she said, pressing a hand to her chest, eyes glistening exactly on cue. I've watched her produce tears at funerals, church potlucks, PTA budget meetings. My mother can summon emotion the way other people summon a rideshare. "When I look at Brooke," she said, "I see everything I ever dreamed a daughter could become." She talked for almost 2 full minutes. Brooke's degree. Brooke's career. Brooke's grace under pressure. She never said my name once. Walter shifted in his seat, the kind of man who quietly counts what's missing from a story. He waited until she paused for breath. "And your other daughter?" he asked. "Maya, is it? She's here with us tonight too." My mother blinked, recalibrated, found her footing fast. She looked at me the way you look at a stain on a tablecloth you thought you'd already treated. "Oh, this is our other daughter. She cleans houses for a living." She said it with a smile, like it was a charming footnote on an otherwise polished resume. My father added, without being asked, "We stopped expecting much from her a long time ago." He laughed once. Nobody laughed with him. 2 seconds of silence. Diane Ashford set down her fork slowly, the way you set something down when you've decided what comes next actually matters. 22 people watching, and she hadn't blinked once. The silence held a full 3 seconds, long enough for the server to freeze mid-pour at Walter's water glass. Diane turned to me. Her voice was level, unhurried, the exact tone she'd used in that boardroom when she asked about retention rates. "Maya, I'm curious. Tell me about your cleaning work." My mother moved fast. "Oh, it's nothing fancy. She goes to people's homes, that sort of thing. Been doing it since college." Diane didn't even look at her. "I'd like to hear it from Maya, if you don't mind." That sentence landed on the table like a dropped glass. Polite. Clear. Final. I set down my napkin. "I own a commercial facilities company," I said. "We service office buildings, hospitals, and universities." My mother's smile went thin. She makes it sound so official. Diane, still looking only at me, "How many states?" 16. My father's fork clinked against his plate. His hand had just twitched. "How many employees?" 310, as of last month. My sister's head turned toward me slowly, like watching someone glance up from their phone and realize the building across the street is on fire. Walter leaned back in his chair. Caleb's sister's lips parted. My mother's smile had vanished completely, replaced by nothing, a blank wall where a window used to be. Diane reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Navy blue. Clean font. A tagline along the bottom I could read from across the table, because I'd spent 2 days choosing every word of it myself. She set it on the white tablecloth in front of my mother. Face up. Centered. "Wait," she said quietly. Not a question. A confirmation, asked out loud only so my mother could hear it. "You're her?" "Yes, ma'am." Diane looked at my mother, then my father, then back at me. Her voice carried the way voices carry in courtrooms, measured, factual, no decoration. My company signed a $4.1 million annual contract with Whitfield Facility Solutions 18 months ago. 44 buildings across 2 states. Maya presented the proposal herself. She sat at my boardroom table. A pause. She has the highest retention rate of any vendor we've ever worked with. I watched my mother's face lose every bit of color it had. It started at her cheeks and spread to her lips. Her hand, still wrapped around her wineglass, went white at the knuckles. My father's hand froze halfway to his own glass. My sister stared at me, mouth slightly open, the ring on her finger catching light she'd completely stopped noticing. My grandmother didn't move. She just looked at my mother with an expression I'd never been able to name before that exact moment. It was patience, the specific kind that comes from watching a lie you've known about for years finally meet open air. 4 seconds of silence. Then everyone spoke at once. Caleb leaned forward. Wait, Maya, you run a company? His sister, 16 states? Walter turned to my father. Russell, did you know about this? Then, sharper, you said you'd given up on her. My father picked up his wineglass, drank, and said nothing. My mother recovered first. She always does. 30 years of controlling the story in a small town doesn't unravel in a single evening. She leaned forward, pressed her palms together, and found a new voice warmer, whiter, dressed in surprise that landed just north of convincing. Well, she never told us it was that big. Maya is very private. We had no idea. She turned to Diane with manufactured wonder. I always knew she'd do well for herself. I set my fork down. You knew, Mom. I told you at year 3. You asked how many people I had mopping floors. Her face hardened for half a second before she smoothed it back over. I never said that. From the end of the table, my grandmother's voice. Quiet. Steady. Final. You said it, Carol. On speakerphone. I was sitting right there. My father reached for the bread basket, put his hand on a roll, didn't pick it up. Just held it there, like a man who'd forgotten what he was even reaching for. My mother's eyes filled, right on schedule. She pressed her napkin to her mouth and inhaled a shaky, theatrical breath. I can't believe you're doing this to me. At your sister's engagement. Dinner. She turned to Diane, switching registers entirely, softer, conspiratorial, one mother to another. I'm so sorry. Family can be complicated. We've always tried to support both our girls. My sister reached for our mother's arm, reflexive, the way the favored child is trained to comfort on cue. I didn't take the bait. I didn't bring this up, Mom. You introduced me. Diane asked a question. I answered it. My sister pulled her hand back and looked at me. Can we please just stop? This is my night. Her voice pitched high, not cruel, just cornered. Why does everything have to be about you? Brooke. I've been sitting here eating salmon. I didn't make a speech. I answered a direct question. Diane spoke again, not loud, but with a kind of gravity that didn't need volume. Brooke, no one is trying to ruin your evening. But your mother made specific claims about your sister in front of my family that simply aren't true. In my experience, facts aren't drama. The room held its breath. My grandmother sat in her wheelchair at the end of the table and watched her own daughter the way you watch a house you'd warned everyone about finally catch fire. My father tried to break the tension with a laugh. Well, this is quite the dinner show. The sound landed in the room like a dropped coin in an empty church. Nobody laughed with him. He pivoted, tried for the reasonable father voice he probably used at the bank when a customer's complaint was getting complicated. Maya, look, we didn't know. You could have told us. We're not mind readers. I did tell you, Dad. 3 times. You stopped listening, and eventually I stopped talking. Walter leaned forward, not aggressive, just honest. Russell, I'll be straight with you. If one of my children had built an $18 million company, I'd want every person in this room to know it. That sentence hit a nerve. My father had spent 3 decades protecting the unchanged title, the steady but stalled career, the quiet story. He'd told himself that staying in place was its own kind of success. Walter hadn't meant to expose anything. He was just stating a fact out loud. But facts have a way of becoming shrapnel when they land too close to an old insecurity. My mother cut back in. Well, then she should have said something clearly. How are we supposed to know if she doesn't tell us? My grandmother's voice came from the far end of the table, the kind of voice that doesn't need volume because everyone already knows it carries weight. She did say something, Carol. You just didn't want to hear it. My mother looked at her own mother, and for the first time all evening, I saw something on her face I'd never seen there before. Not shame. Fear. My mother stood, smoothed her dress, and walked toward the hallway. She paused beside my chair without looking down. Come with me. I followed, not because she'd told me to, but because I wanted to hear whatever she had to say without 22 pairs of ears around us. The hallway was quiet. She turned to face me, and the tears were already gone. Her eyes were dry, hard, clear. You planned this. You came here to humiliate me. I came here because Grandma asked me to. Don't hide behind her. You knew Diane would be there. You knew she'd recognize you. I set nothing up, Mom. I showed up. I sat down. I ate my dinner. You're the one who stood up and called me the family cleaning lady in front of 24 people. Her jaw worked. She changed angles. If you think this changes anything, you're still the girl who chose to scrub toilets instead of getting a real education. I have a degree, Mom. I chose a different path. You chose to pretend it didn't exist. After everything I sacrificed for you, everything I gave up. You gave up your career. I know. You remind me every time we talk. But that was your choice. This is mine. If you walk away from this family, you'll have nothing. I looked at this woman who had traded a career she resented for a kitchen she never stopped punishing us for, and I said the only thing that was true. I'll have exactly what I have right now. A company. 310 employees. And a grandmother who actually knows my name. She flinched. Then she walked back into the dining room, spine straight, mask fully reassembled. A woman who has never once left a public room looking defeated, no matter what actually happened behind closed doors. My sister caught me before I followed her back in. She was crying, real crying, the kind with mascara running and her voice catching on syllables she couldn't fully control. Why didn't you ever tell me? She asked. I'm your sister. When was the last time you asked me about my actual life, Brooke? Not texted about a holiday schedule. Asked. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. I'm not angry at you, I told her. You believed what Mom told you because it was easier than checking for yourself. I thought you were struggling. Mom said what Mom needed to believe. And you never once questioned it. She pressed her back against the opposite wall, 4 feet of hallway between us. The closest we'd physically been in years, and somehow also the furthest. She didn't say she was sorry. She wasn't ready for that word yet. But she didn't defend our mother either, and in our family, silence against Carol Whitfield is its own quiet form of rebellion. I walked back into the dining room and stood behind my chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grip the table or square my shoulders the way people do in movies right before delivering the speech of their lives. I just stood there, one hand on the chair back, the other in my pocket, thumb resting against the embroidered initials on my grandmother's handkerchief. I'm going to say this once, I said. The table went still. Forks stopped moving. Even the server by the door paused with a tray balanced on her forearm. I love this family. I've spent 11 years loving it from a distance, because that distance was the only thing that let me breathe. I looked at my mother. Mom, you introduced me tonight as the one who cleans houses. Dad, you said you'd given up on me. I let that sit in front of people I'd never met, in front of Grandma. I looked at her. She was watching me with both hands flat on the table, steady as a judge, eyes wet but chin lifted. She never gave up, my grandmother said. She asked. She listened. She showed up. I turned back to the table. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I came because my grandmother wanted me here. But I won't sit at a table where my own parents describe me as less than what I actually am. I took a breath. So here's what changes. I will always answer Grandma's calls. I will always show up when she asks. But I won't be attending family events where I'm expected to pretend I'm smaller than I am. That's not a punishment. It's a boundary. I sat back down and took a sip of water. The room stayed silent for 5 full seconds. Then my mother broke. She stood, chair legs scraping against the hardwood. You can't just, her voice cracked, she caught it, rebuilt it, lost it again. You can't just leave. I'm your mother. I looked at her. Come. Then act like one. 3 words. They landed in that room like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples reached every corner of it. Her composure shattered, not the staged kind this time, the real kind. Her chest heaved. Her hands trembled against the table's edge. Tears actually fell, and for the first time all night, I couldn't tell whether they were genuine or rehearsed. I'm not sure she could tell either. I gave up everything for this family. Everything. My career, she stopped. Looked around. Saw Walter watching. Saw Diane's stillness. Realized, a beat too late, that she'd said too much in front of exactly the people she'd spent the whole evening trying to impress. Diane spoke quietly. Carol, your daughter built something remarkable. Perhaps it's time you actually looked at it. My mother's head snapped toward her. You don't know our family. I know your daughter, Diane said. That's enough for me. My father sat frozen, silent, the way he'd ridden out 30 years of marriage, present in body, absent in every way that ever mattered. From the end of the table, sit down, Carol. My grandmother's voice, thin but iron. My mother sat. Not because she agreed. Because Eleanor was still her mother, and even Carol Whitfield, commander of narratives, couldn't defy that voice in front of 22 witnesses. I pushed my chair back and walked to the end of the table. My grandmother's cardigan had slipped off one shoulder. I fixed it without thinking, the way you fix small things automatically for people you love. I knelt beside her. She took my hands in hers, thin fingers, swollen knuckles, papery skin, but a grip that was unmistakably hers. You don't need to stay for me, sweetheart, she said quietly, just for me. You already came. That's enough. I'll call you Sunday. Same time. You better. She slipped something small into my palm without looking down, a folded piece of paper. I closed my fingers around it. I stood, turned to Diane. Thank you for the questions, Mrs. Ashford. Thank you for the answers. I picked up my purse, and then, because some things are better left where they can be found later, I took a business card from my wallet and set it on the table beside my mother's place setting. Navy blue. Clean font. Centered. Then I walked out. Steady pace, flat shoes on hardwood. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I heard my mother say something behind me, sharp and clipped, already composing the version of this story she'd tell her friends by Tuesday. The words never reached me before the front door closed behind me with a clean, final click. I drove 11 miles before I pulled into an empty church parking lot to sit with something too large for a moving car. I opened my grandmother's note. Her handwriting was shaky, the letters leaning right like they were bracing against wind, but every word legible. Maya. I watched you build your life the way I always wished I'd built mine. Your mother got my fear. You got my courage. I'm sorry it took me this long to say that out loud. Don't wait for them to see you. The right people already do. Grandma. I read it 3 times. Then I cried, not the graceful, single tear kind from a movie, but the real kind, Bent over a steering wheel in a parking lot I'd never visited, windows fogging from the heat of 11 years, finally finding somewhere to go. Here's the part of this story most people skip when they tell something like this. It didn't resolve into a perfect bow. My mother called 7 times over the next 2 days. I let every single one go to voicemail. The first 3 were sharp and clipped, the voice of a woman who genuinely believes she's been wronged by the person she wronged. The next 2 were softer, wet with real tears, the kind of plea that almost worked on the version of me from a decade ago. The last 2 were just silence, 10 seconds each, then a click. My father sent one text 3 days later. 4 words. Your mother is upset. I read it. I didn't respond. My sister texted that same week. I'm sorry I never asked. Can we talk, not about mom, just us? I read it. I didn't delete it. I haven't responded yet either, but I'm not pretending the door is closed. Diane Ashford emailed me the following Monday with the subject line dinner and a contract. She wrote that her son was marrying into an interesting family, but he wasn't marrying his mother-in-law, and that my company remained their most valued vendor. She invited me to dinner sometime, not business, just 2 women who'd built things from nothing and understood exactly what that costs. I printed that email and taped it to the wall of my office, right next to the very first dollar I ever earned cleaning the dental practice on the east side of Columbus. My grandmother calls every Sunday, same as always. Her voice gets thinner each month. The medication makes her tired in ways she tries to hide from me and mostly fails. She still asks about my numbers, my people, my plans. And I still answer every single question, because she's the only person in my family who ever thought to ask twice. My mother told an entire room full of strangers that I just clean houses. She wasn't wrong about the verb. I do clean. We clean hospitals where children get better. We clean office towers where people build entire careers. We clean university halls where the next generation is still learning who they're going to become. There is nothing small in any of that work, and there never was. The people who are going to see you clearly already see you. And the ones who refuse to, no business card, no contract, no number on a page will ever be enough to change their mind. I stopped trying to be the second thing a long time ago. I'm still working on accepting the first. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life who needed to hear something true, share it with them. Drop a comment about the moment you stopped shrinking for people who refuse to see you. And I'll see you in the next one.